Welcome to Change Cycle, the podcast exploring the shift to a circular economy. Join host Christine Yeager as she dives into sustainable business actions with leading experts and confronts the discomfort that comes with change. Discover how change is at the center of optimizing recycling and creating a regenerative future. Tune into Change Cycle and be part of the solution.
Hi, welcome back to Change Cycle. I'm still your host, Christine Yeager, and we're going to go deep again today on a topic called program plans, which, if you've worked in business at all, could mean loads of things. But if you go back a couple of episodes, you'll see that we're sort of following a path of EPR and sort of how it comes to be. So I talked a little bit about what EPR is, and then we talked to Jeff Inch, who is the head of producer services at Circular Action Alliance, which is the approved producer responsibility organization in Colorado, California, Oregon, and Minnesota. And that his role is really about helping producers comply with extended producer responsibility legislation. And so the first step, if you will, in EPR compliance is determining whether or not you are a producer. So that's why we had that conversation sort of right at the beginning. Then, if you may have seen, we went deep on the needs assessments, because what happens is the states need to start to understand where do they need to invest. They need to understand how much it's going to cost to change the recycling rates across the states where there's extended producer responsibility. But for the context of everybody, and since you may not live in an EPR state, we talked about the needs across the nation. And then we talked to somebody who you might consider a service provider. So after a producer is engaged, they are defined that they determine that they are obligated, and then they report, and then they pay fees. Those fees are allocated based on the needs of the system, and then those fees are reimbursed or now reinvested back into the state to address those needs. And they do that through service providers. Now, Osprey Initiatives, who we interviewed, isn't a service provider in all of the EPR states, and they're a little unconventional. But nonetheless, they are actively improving recycling infrastructure. So they're an example of a service provider. Now, today, we're going to talk about the program plans. So after understanding what the needs are in a particular state, CAA, or Circular Action Alliance, one of their roles is to develop a program plan. And this program plan is meant to determine how the Circular Action Alliance, or the PRO, is going to invest in improving infrastructure. And these plans, they're more than just compliance. The idea is that they're blueprints that will determine how recycling systems are designed and funded and held accountable in the years ahead. So what are we going to cover today? Today, we're going to cover what is a program plan under Extended Producer Responsibility, or EPR, how the Oregon and Colorado plans, which are the only two current plans available to review, compare and differ. We're talking about funding models and oversight and things like that. And then what specific improvements can we expect according to the program plans? What is that going to look like? And then we're going to end with why do these plans matter for brands, governments, and recyclers alike. So on Change Cycle, we recognize that not everybody knows everything about circularity or sustainability. And so today, the program plan is the vocabulary topic as a headline, but there's a couple of vocabulary items that you need to understand in order to sort of go deep with me here on these program plans. So EPR, Extended Producer Responsibility. Again, this is a policy that shifts the funding mechanism of recycling, the cost to recycle or manage the material at the end of use, away from municipalities and governments and onto the brands that make and sell that paper or packaging. Program plans. Program plans are a detailed roadmap submitted by a producer responsibility organization or a PRO that outlines how the EPR system will function in accordance to the recommendations in accordance to the legislation, if there are any guiding principles in the legislation. Producer responsibility organization or PRO is the nonprofit in most cases that runs the EPR system on behalf of the obligated producers. And in the case of paper and packaging, this is Circular Action Alliance in the states that have made a selection. Maine has not yet made a selection, but they don't anticipate making their selection until 2026. Also, something that's a little nuanced and very unique to EPR and these program plans is this idea of a minimum recyclables list, or an MRL. Like, nobody knows that acronym, so I wouldn't use it. But this is a statewide baseline for what materials must be accepted across the state for recycling. And the goal is to get your material onto that minimum recyclables list. And the exciting thing about this is, in the state of Colorado, the whole state will accept this minimum recyclables list, which means you as a consumer don't have to guess at the bin. You'll know these are the things that are accepted in my state. Doesn't that sound great? For a waste nerd, it does. Then finally, I think another important key vocabulary item is eco-modulation. This is a fee structure that rewards producers for going above and beyond, or the use of recyclable materials or other things that you may do, like putting more recycled material into your packaging. So going above and beyond the industry there's an opportunity to receive a fee benefit. Need help navigating extended producer responsibility? At CSY Impact Consulting, we specialize in helping brands not just comply with EPR, but thrive under it. The shift to a circular economy is happening. Make sure your company is ready to lead, not scramble. Visit csyimpact.com to learn more. CSY Impact Consulting, where compliance meets opportunity. Or, in the case of Oregon, a certain number of producers have to be evaluated to see if they are below or behind the industry. And then in those cases, they might receive a penalty. So eco-modulation is something that a lot of people talk about as this opportunity area from a packaging standpoint. But I do want to be clear that there are base fees, and those base fees are the real driver of the business shifts that might happen from a material standpoint. Because if you're not on a minimum recyclable list, and your material is not going to be on that minimum recyclables list, in the state of California, your material may be banned at some point. So there's a lot of power in what materials end up. And if there's an end market or a commodity value to the material that's coming through the recycling system, so it's on the minimum recyclables list and there's a commodity value with it, then the base fee is much lower than something that is not on the minimum recyclable list and does not have a commodity value with it. So for fees can come through in this idea of a base fee or an eco-modulated fee. And an eco-modulated fee is something where you are receiving a benefit for going above and beyond the industry. All right, bear with me. Thank you for already listening to all of that. I think somebody recently said, let's nerd out about the program plan. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going deep. We're going to talk about what the implications are of these program plans. What are they saying at a high level? So here we go. First of all, what is a program plan? We'll talk a little bit more, or we've already talked about this a little bit, but I just want to kind of break down the components. So the program plan spells out who runs the recycling system. In this case, the PRO would be Circular Action Alliance, as well as there's a regulator for each state that has to approve the program plan. Then which materials are covered? So In the case of certain states, you may have a high level understanding of what materials are covered. Like we know it's glass and paper and or fiber and plastics, but the program plan goes into detail which materials and which ways in which you might classify those materials. Is it a rigid PET? Is it a flexible PET? So it's very nuanced and detailed. And those materials that are covered are also the reporting categories for a producer. So that means a producer has to now convert their SKU data into how much flexible PET are they selling into the marketplace, for example. In the program plan is also based on those covered materials or reporting material categories, how much producers will have to pay, or in the case of Oregon, this is fees. And in the case of Colorado, this is dues. Also in the program plan is how service providers, and I mentioned Osprey as an example of a service provider, but a more typical example of a service provider would be a material recovery facility or a MRF, a hauler, like the garbage trucks that drive around. Local governments, in many cases, may manage and operate the MRF. So it's how are they, those people that are doing the recycling and are part of the infrastructure, how will they be reimbursed to improve the infrastructure? And then how will performance be measured? What is the yardstick that they're going to be measured against? And in the case of Colorado, there's actually milestones that have to be achieved along the way. So these plans are the first real test of whether EPR can drive scalable, measurable improvement. They're the first of their kind in the US, and they're the first blueprints out there. And if they are executed against, it'll be a huge win in the EPR space. So we talked a little bit about the market needs a couple of episodes ago, but I just want to kind of refresh. So in Oregon's plan is responding to an inconsistent access to recycling, especially in rural areas, a lack of a unified definition of what is recyclable system-wide or unified system-wide and statewide, and then poor data tracking and market accountability, language and equity barriers, and outreach and education. Colorado's plan is responding to the needs that they have one of the lowest recycling rates in the country at 22%. They have infrastructure gaps in both organics and curbside collection. It calls out that there's no consistent access for many households and multifamily units, also, especially in the rural communities. And then there's weak and underfunded in markets and widespread contamination. So both states used needs assessment of some kind to inform their program plans. And both aim to close systemic gaps in funding, equity, access, and performance. So where are they aligned? What are the top three similarities? Producer responsibility organization management and producer funding. They're both aligned on how it's going to be funded and how it's going to be governed. Circular Action Alliance is that pro, and producers are fully funding the programs. They both have core goals in expanding access, improving recycling rates, building responsible end markets, and investing in education. And then they both talk about stakeholder engagement, strong emphasis on partnerships with service providers, also tribal nations, local governments, and advisory boards. This is a mini stakeholder problem that the program plan recognizes and addresses. But there are some key differences in priorities between Colorado and Oregon because they're different states and they have different needs. So one, infrastructure investment focus. So in Colorado, they're prioritizing the build out of organics and composting infrastructure with $49 million in estimated upgrades. And this aligns with the state's broader diversion strategy and growing interest in compostable packaging. Oregon, on the other hand, is focused on expanding and modernizing curbside and depot collection, Its plan includes funding for a new statewide depot network targeting 65% coverage by the end of 2026 and 100% by 2027. Another area of different focus would be an equity and access strategy. So in Oregon, they incorporate bilingual education, time-based reimbursement models to better support rural communities and tailored outreach to historically underserved populations. Colorado is prioritizing universal access, mandating recycling for all households with trash service, and expanding collection to include schools, hospitality, and small businesses. So the statement in Colorado is your recycling should be as easy as your trash. However you get your trash, everybody should have, who has trash service should have the availability of recycling service, however that happens. Then market development approach. So Oregon is focusing more heavily on eco-modulated fees to influence producer behavior and ties funding directly to packaging recyclability and environmental impact. They are requiring an LCA to achieve the eco-modulated benefits. Colorado is establishing a minimum recycling and collection rate target by material type. So this provides clear accountability over time. So what improvements can we expect in each of these states based on the program plans? So Oregon, as mentioned, you should see curbside and depot services expand, especially in rural areas. A standardized statewide recyclable list, an eco-modulated fee that rewards better packaging choices. And this is like one of the beauties of EPR is this continued connection between economic incentive for a better, more recyclable packaging choice. And they have a goal of 100% producer responsibility depot coverage by 2027. So by 2027, everyone should have, or the depot should service the entire community of Oregon. And then targeted education, including bilingual campaigns. So Colorado, we should see guaranteed recycling access for every household with trash service. What was the feedback? The Producer Responsibility Advisory Board submitted 9 formal amendment requests and dozens of recommendations to improve the plan's rigor, transparency, and environmental outcomes. Some of the most notable amendment requests include requiring more clarity around how costs for plan updates and needs assessments will be allocated in producer dues or fees. In the state of Colorado, they call them dues. They also gave feedback on strengthening the reimbursement methodology, including defining when and how formulas can be revised. They recommended that they address infrastructure gaps, especially in composting and rural services, and that those things be prioritized with specific funding commitments. So a little more clarity around how those things are going to be funded. And then general call for greater transparency on what those eco-modulation fees look like and a clear strategy to encourage post-consumer recycled content or PCR. And they also pushed for a roadmap to transition some hard-to-recycle materials into the recyclable stream by 2030. And one note on post-consumer recycled content or PCR, CDPHE recommended restricting mass balance claims. Like, what is mass balance? Okay, so mass balance is kind of this idea that you can sort of say, on average, we have this amount of post-consumer recycled material in our packaging, but due to market volatility, it may not be 100% of the time. So let's say it says 30% recycled material on your package. Over the lifetime of making that package or over a certain period of time and making that package, it might be 30%. But if you use a mass balance approach, it might go up and it might go down depending on the market volatility of recycled PET and or the availability at all, or the like when the trucks are coming in and depending on your supplier. So that's an example related to PET. This concept can be applied to all sorts of things, but CDPHE is recommending that they restrict mass balance claims, stating that the use of mass balance accounting should not be allowed for PCR content claims made to the public, meaning you shouldn't be allowed to claim an average. You should be clear that you are using this. If you're going to say a percentage, that you're using that percentage all of the time. And this is a strong stance aimed at ensuring that any claims made about recycled content are credible, traceable, and physically linked to actual material recovery. And this is also a very controversial stance because some companies, might find that it's very difficult to have a consistent availability of that recycled content. And so therefore, they are using the recycled content as they can. But if they can't claim it, then they're not getting the consumer benefit from it. But it's not all the time. And it has nothing to do with their willingness. It may just have to do with the availability. It sort of depends on the scenario. The advisory board also encouraged additional steps, such as prioritizing small and local service providers in contracts, establishing clearer metrics for reuse and refill systems, because that doesn't exist really, and then requiring third-party audits to verify environmental performance. And this review is a natural course and pathway through the EPR process. And these refinements will help shape the success of this EPR system in the state of Colorado and potentially other places. So finally, what many producers, I think, are probably looking for, what are some key milestones and deadlines that are coming through in these program plans? So in Oregon, July 1st of 2025, the program officially launches, which means the bill also goes out. The invoice is also going out to producers. But that means that the pro depots can start operating, and they can also start the reimbursement process with service providers. Producer payments begin, so the money starts to come in, and outreach, community outreach, and in education must be live. And then amendments to the statewide material list are due later in 2025. So there will be a process to adjust and hopefully add more things to that material list. And the first round of that is due later in the year. In Colorado, the first reporting deadline, to everybody's excitement, I'm sure, is July 31st of 2025. And what that means is if you are an obligated producer in the state of Colorado, you must submit your material supply data for the year of 2024 against every covered material outlined in the program plan by July 31st of 2025. Then at the end of 2025, the program plan is expected to be approved. And then January 1st of 2026 is when the full program implementation begins. The invoices go out, the reimbursements begin. So why does this matter and what should you expect? If Oregon and Colorado get this right, the conversation shifts. It's no longer can EPR work in the US. It becomes how fast can other states follow? Or it becomes look at the success and look at the changes that are being made as a beacon for hope of driving a circular economy. These program plans represent the most ambitious attempt yet to increase statewide recycling rates. Oregon expects to boost paper and packaging recycling from 34% to 50%, with improvements across multifamily and commercial sectors. Colorado aims to raise its overall recycling rate from 22% to 55%, as mentioned, by 2035. This also shifts costs from the taxpayers to producers, as EPR naturally does. It builds the financial incentive to invest in modern infrastructure in a very antiquated system, and it elevates recycling from a broken patchwork to a functioning system. It will no longer be, does my neighbor recycle the same thing as me or not? It will be everybody recycles the same things, at least in those states. And the system begins to function, and there's hopefully a renewed belief in that recycling can work for paper and packaging. And if we succeed, we get more than better bends, we get more reuse, less landfill, stronger end markets, and a measurable climate impact. So thank you for going deep with me on the Colorado program plan. I know it's a lot. And thank you for being here. And I appreciate your time. And I hope you enjoyed it. So why embrace the program plans? I mean, besides the fact that they're a core component of compliance as far as the EPR regulation is concerned. But if they succeed, we get more than better bends. We get more reuse, less landfill, stronger end markets, and a measurable climate impact. And I think we might even get a renewed belief and a new generation that believes that recycling can be a positive impact on our waste problem. So thank you for being here, and we'll see you next time. How do we balance the urgent work of building a circular economy with the personal sustainability we need to keep going? In our next episode of Change Cycle, I sit down with Rachel Zarowin of Circular Action Alliance to talk about Colorado's groundbreaking producer responsibility law, the power of approachable language in sustainability, and why self-care is essential for systems change. From wish cycling myths to daily bike rides, we cover it all. This one's about heart, impact, and staying human while driving big change.
Thank you for listening to Change Cycle. We hope that today's conversation inspires you to embrace the change that comes with building a world where circularity and social equity power the economy. Visit csyimpact.com to learn more about how you can implement sustainable strategies in your business. That's csyimpact.com. Thanks again, and we look forward to having you join us next time on Change Cycle.